Thank you. Before I move on to the next item of business, can I say there is no time in hand, and accordingly people must be very strict with themselves so I don't have to be strict with them. That's a happy marriage. The next item of business is a debate on motion 24134 in the name of Jean Freeman on independent review of adult social care. Can I ask those members who wish to take part in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now? And I call on Jean Freeman to speak to and move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, please.
Thank you very much. Presiding Officer, the independent review of social care gives us a clear roadmap for the future of care provision in Scotland. Central to its proposition is that we see and deliver on adult social care as an investment we make collectively in ourselves and in each other. It is a shift in thinking which underpins future funding, commissioning, regulation and, critically, delivery. We believe in the recommendations in this report, and in the elections in May we will ask the people of Scotland to back the creation of a national care service, a service on a par with our NHS. The foundation for delivering on the recommendations is the adult social care workforce. They must be recognised, offered opportunity to develop skills and expertise, and rewarded for the significant value they bring every day to the important job they do. And I will come to the specifics on that shortly. The backdrop to the review is clear in the terrible loss of life from the COVID-19 pandemic. I know I speak for everyone in this chamber when I offer my condolences to everyone who has lost a loved one to this virus, whether a care home resident, a staff member, or someone who was in their own home. Before I turn to the detail, I want to place on record my personal thanks to the Chair of the Independent Review, Derek Feely, his advisory panel of experts, and to everyone who gave them evidence and feedback. It is a testimony to everyone involved in the process that a thorough and comprehensive review was delivered swiftly, with strong engagement from those who have lived experience of adult social care, representative organisations, providers of social care in the public, private and third sectors, and with trade unions. The review's report, I'll come to you in a second. Well, no, I'll take you now, Mr Finlay. Yes.
Neil Finlay.
Thanks. It was just before the Minister moved on there. I was just wondering, she said that the report produces a plan for a system that's based on an equivalence to the NHS. Could she elaborate on that?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think what the report centrally says to us is that we need to accord adult social care the same value in everything we do in its delivery and how we treat its workforce as we do our NHS. The review's report has been widely welcomed. It recommends changing the narrative of social care and putting human rights at the heart of it, moving from a competitive market to one of collaboration and ethical approaches to commissioning and procurement, putting an end to charging for non-residential care, as well as a revised funding structure for free personal and nursing care. Crucially, the report calls for the creation of a national care service to drive delivery of consistent, high-quality social care support and put adult social care on the same footing as our NHS. To support the introduction of these changes, the report suggests that we need a new social covenant for adult social care to ensure that it reflects our values and, as a society, our commitment to each other. We need to build on the strong foundations we currently have in the system. There is legislation in place to underpin self-directed support, the Carers Act, and our commitment in legislation to integrate health and social care. And while there are many people already receiving good quality care and support, that experience needs to be consistent across the country, and that is not the case now. We need to redesign parts of the system, including legislating for a national care service with reformed integration joint boards, focusing on prevention, early intervention, deinstitutionalisation and, at its heart, the involvement of people who use services, unpaid carers and the workforce. The central role of IJBs will help ensure that local representation will be vital in the shaping of services. This National Care Service would also introduce a national improvement programme for social care, initially addressing 3 key areas: the experience and implementation of self-directed support, the safety and quality of care provided in care homes, and improving commissioning and procurement processes to embed Fair Work principles and inform reformed regulation, inspection and improvement. But while there is widespread support for the review's recommendations, there are also concerns. Let me touch on two that are amongst the most important. The first is the understandable concern expressed by COSLA on the issue of accountability. I understand that concern, and I know that local government is a critical partner in taking forward the radical change the review rightly calls for. Yesterday, I had the first of what will be a number of meetings with COSLA to learn more about the concerns they have and to begin to work through how we might jointly work through these. Local government has experience and an understanding of local communities and needs and provides a range of vital services closely connected to social care. The report recognises this. So we do need to work together to find the best way to secure the review's recommendations and the spirit of its intent. What is abundantly clear, though, is how much we and COSLA agree on. I hope that before this Parliament rises for the elections in May, we will have reached areas of agreement with COSLA that form a firm foundation for the work of the next Scottish Government. The second concern lies with those whose lived experience contributed so much to the review. That this is another report of fine words and laudable sentiments that in the end goes nowhere, because vested interests combine to make little real improvement to people's lives, because we spend all our energy and time arguing about structures that we fail to grasp the opportunity to deliver. I understand that concern too, and I take it very seriously. For them, there is no time left to waste and too many lives still to be fully lived. But there is immediate action that we can take now to secure improvement. On the associated themes of individual autonomy and citizenship, I'm pleased to announce a new Community Living Change Fund of £20 million to deliver a redesign of services for people with complex needs, including intellectual disabilities and autism, and those who have enduring mental health problems, focusing on delivering a proper sense of home for people with complex needs, including those who have encountered lengthy hospital stays or who might have been placed outside Scotland and who could and should be more appropriately supported closer to home. The report highlights too the fundamental role of unpaid carers in our society. The Carers Act is a building block to strengthen the rights and status of unpaid carers and must act as a springboard for major improvements. I've already prioritised support for the implementation of the Carers Act, backing that with significant investment, which now stands at £39.5 million a year, with an additional £28.5 million uplift earmarked for the Carers Act in the draft budget for 21-22, bringing the total investment in local support for carers to £68 million. The report also recognises and highlights the critical and invaluable support that the social care workforce provide to people all over Scotland. A key recommendation from the Fair Work Convention report for social care is to consider the establishment of a new sector-level body responsible for ensuring that social care workers have effective voice and the development of a collective bargaining role in that sector. I can confirm our support for that and that this work is being taken forward through the Fair Work and Social Care Group chaired by Andy Kerr. By the end of May, we will establish a minimum set of standards which reflect fair work, effective voice, what this will look like, how that plays out in terms and conditions, and how it will be applied across all of our social care workforce. Since 2016, we have provided funding to enable adult social care workers to be paid the real living wage for waking hours. During 2018-19, this commitment was extended to include those undertaking overnight social care support. But we want to ensure that there is no delay in the annual uplift being received by the workforce. I can confirm that with that Fair Work Social Care Group as a priority, we will seek to agree a national approach to implementing the real living wage for adult social care workers for 2021 and future years. The report rightly highlights how commissioning for the public good can also drive change, and that ethical commissioning and procurement can support the standardisation and implementation of fair work requirements and practices. I've therefore asked that this year's minute of variation requirement for the National Care Home contract should also embed changes which drive the Fair Work agenda, and that for the first time, union representatives should be party to the discussions on this contract. I want to work towards parity with the National Health Service, where healthcare and social care are both free at the point of delivery. So we will work with local partners as quickly as practical to end all charges for non-residential care. I've already announced a significant uplift in the allowances for self-funders, and I want to move swiftly towards a position where all care is fully funded in residential settings. Finally, the report has recommended a number of important areas for investment, substantial investment, not in more of the same, but in supports that propel our vital social care system forward and make it one which works consistently and to a high standard across the country for those who need it. The report sets out how we need to invest in adult social care financially and highlights the wider economic benefits of investing in our social care system. You may be tempted, many may be tempted to ask how we can afford this, but I think for me, for the report authors and for many across the Chamber, the answer has to be, how can Scotland now not afford to? I believe, as the report sets out, Presiding Officer, that improving adult social care gives us a tremendous opportunity to improve people's lives, to build our economy and to invest in high-quality, fair work. This is just the beginning of a process for improvement. It is now up to us in this Parliament to consider carefully the practical application of these recommendations and build on good practice to ensure a social care system that consistently delivers high-quality services across Scotland, a system that is founded in fairness, equality and human rights, and puts lived experience at the heart of its redesign and delivery. And I move the motion in my name.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. I now call on Donald Cameron to speak to and move Amendment 24134.4. Mr Cameron, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I begin by moving the amendment in my name? I welcome the opportunity to open for the Scottish Conservatives in this important debate, and I want to place on record my party's thanks to the advisory panel and all those who contributed to this thorough and wide-ranging report. But I particularly want to pay tribute to Derek Feely himself, not just for leading on this report, but for his regular engagement with health spokespeople from all political parties during this process. I can honestly say that in all my time as an MSP, I've never felt more involved in a review like this. And much of that comes down to the personal dedication shown by Mr. Feely and a genuine and sincere attempt to consult with opposition politicians. Such a radical and refreshing approach should be the way forward for future reviews and reports, in my view. It is important that we reflect on why this review was commissioned in the first place and why it is critical that we make changes going forward. One factor behind this review, not the only factor of course, but an important one nonetheless, was the tragic loss of life in our care homes during the COVID-19 pandemic last year. Something that is still happening, though thanks to life-saving vaccines and better practices, the mortality rate is declining. The latest figures show that there have been 3,146 deaths in a care home where COVID-19 was mentioned on the death certificate. That accounts for 36% of Scotland's total COVID-19 deaths. Over a third. That is 3,146 lost mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, and friends. That is 3,146 grieving families left behind and looking for urgent answers. And we know that over 100 patients were sent to care homes in the pandemic earlier on, despite testing positive for COVID-19. And we also know that according to Public Health Scotland, some 3,000 odd patients were discharged into care homes without being tested in the 1st of March and the 30th of May. Now, these may have been clinical decisions, but they were clinical decisions overseen by this government, which is why our amendment repeats our call, already twice agreed by parliamentary votes, for a public inquiry into this. The other key factor behind this review is the near universally agreed view the way we deliver social care is not working. Change is needed. The RCN have said that the current way that adult social care operates is not fit for purpose and needs radical overhaul, and I agree with them. There are many recommendations emerging from this report that the Scottish Conservatives agree with and welcome. We agree that carers need better, more consistent support to carry out their caring role well, as the report states. And we as a party have a strong record supporting our carers, including the delivery of short breaks for unpaid carers as part of the 2016 Carers Bill, and our calls for an increase in the carers allowance. We also agree with the need to remove the needlessly bureaucratic process of accessing social care, with families describing it in the report as notoriously difficult and overcomplicated. There are strong and compelling arguments for applying national standards and for driving high-quality care on a Scotland-wide basis, as well as approaching workforce issues at a national level and for a human rights-based approach to delivering care. We acknowledge there is a need to improve training and career development opportunities for carers, with a report arguing that many felt there is a need to improve the skill set of the workforce, and that the Scottish Social Services Council is not equipped or resourced to support effective training and development of staff. The RTN say that its members feel that there is a barrier to nurses working in adult social care due to a lack of opportunity to undergo training at work, as well as a perception, rightly or wrongly, about lack of career progression. At the heart of this review, as the Cabinet Secretary said, is the call for a national care service to be placed on an equal statutory footing with NHS Scotland. We have long agreed that health and social care need to be seen as integral parts of the same system, and that implies parity between them. The Scottish Conservatives believe that the creation of a national care service in Scotland could assist in achieving higher quality care, as well as improving the employment conditions of care workers. But the SNP government must provide details of how this will work in practice. Such a service must avoid becoming a centralised, monolithic structure, must ensure that individual people are at its heart. This government has an unenviable record when it comes to centralisation, and there are patent dangers if this were to become another act of amassing power and control in central government. It is imperative that any change to the delivery of social care should focus on such care being person-centred. We know that one size fits all does not work, and I note the comments of the Coalition of Care and Support Providers in Scotland, who state that any new system must allow for local variation, flexibility and accountability. SAMH note that social care providers also need to be involved in the design of social care services, with many delivering a support service that has not been designed with a person-centred or recovery-based ethos in mind. And we also acknowledge the views of local government, who are concerned that some of the recommendations in the review, especially around the National Care Service, could see local accountability diluted. Osler's Health and Social Care spokesperson, Councillor Stuart Curry, has argued that council leaders are opposed to the recommendation on governance and accountability, which would see the removal of local democratic accountability and a degree of centralisation, which leaders rightly felt would be detrimental to the local delivery of social care and its integration with other key community services. We must be highly mindful of those views, and that any new service should involve local stakeholders going forward, and that local decision-making should be enhanced rather than diminished. The review also calls for reform of integration joint boards as part of a national care service. And again, more detail is needed from the government about what that would involve. IJBs, as presently constituted, are far from perfect, and the current system of integration raises many issues around funding, organisation and delivery. In designing a new service, the Scottish Conservatives believe that a local approach remains crucial, and that local government should receive the support it needs. That is why, for instance, we've pledged to enshrine fair funding for councils into law, ensuring that local authorities receive a set fraction of the Scottish Government budget each year. To draw my comments to a close, Deputy Presiding Officer, this review is detailed and provides many positive ways forward in improving the experience of social care for those receiving it, and also for the many people who are either working in care or providing care voluntarily. Can I reiterate my thanks to Derek Feely and the board for producing this review during the most difficult of circumstances. It's clear that COVID-19 and the pandemic has exposed many of the weaknesses in the existing care system, and that reform is long overdue. But we should be cautious in how we achieve that change and ensure that the people who receive care are at the heart of any change, and that all relevant stakeholders, whether they be the public, the third sector, local government and others, are consulted and kept apprised by the Scottish Government going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Cameron. I call on Monica Lennon to speak to and move Amendment 24134.3. Ms Lennon, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I welcome the debate today and I move the amendment in my name. Scottish Labour has campaigned for improvements to our chronically underfunded care services for a very long time. We believe that social care support in Scotland should always be free at the point of use, based on needs and not income, and should be rooted in a system that respects the dignity of people, service users and staff. Although it breaks my heart that it's taken the effects of a global pandemic to shine a spotlight on the flaws in the current market-based system, I do welcome that we are finally seeing attention, social care getting the attention it deserves. And I'd like to put on record Scottish Labour's thanks to those who have worked on the independent review of adult social care and contributed to its recommendations. There is much to be welcomed, and I am grateful to Derek Feely for his willingness to engage with MSPs to keep us updated and of course to engage widely with trade unions and service users. Social care should be based on upholding human rights. Commissioning of services should be for the public good, and the workforce should always be properly valued. Reform of social care and the creation of a national care service has been Scottish Labour policy for a very long time. Sadly, this was rejected by Nicola Sturgeon when she was the Health Secretary. And my colleague Richard Leonard has used his time in Parliament to bring social care out of the shadows. During Richard's time, he provided leadership, elevating social care and the need for a national care service before and during the pandemic. And it has come back to the top of the political agenda. Scottish Labour's It's Time to Care About Care campaign last year reignited the debate on a national care service, and I'm pleased that Scottish ministers have finally paid heed to what has to be done. And social care has borne the brunt of the pandemic, from what's happened in our care homes to what's happened in people's own homes. And all too often it's been left to staff to raise the alarm or for heartbroken families to speak out. We know that the Scottish Government's own pandemic preparedness report, Silver Swan, identified social care as a weak link. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had repeated warnings from trade unions and frontline workers, including Unison, Unite and GMB, and I refer to my register of interests. But they were all speaking out about the inadequacy of PPE, and those calls went unheeded for too long. In fact, in April last year, there was still Scottish Government guidance in circulation from the Chief Nursing Officer suggesting that home carers didn't need any PPE at all beyond the basic apron and gloves that they always use. So whilst we welcome the recommendations in the report, we also want to hear when the country is going to get a public inquiry into the pandemic response, and in particular into what's happened in social care. There was comments in the Chamber earlier today about the exclusion of essential caregivers. I want to pay tribute to my colleague Neil Findlay, who I'm sad is leaving the Parliament at the end of this term. But Neil Findlay has worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic to make the case that family caregivers are an essential part of the care team. They're not an extra. They're not just a visitor. They should also have access to PPE, to testing, to be part of the safe provision of care in our care homes. So I do hope we get to a place where we can, as a Parliament, unite and support Anne's Law, which would ensure that this can never happen again, that people spend a year in isolation without access to their loved ones. Now, the opportunity posed by the creation of a national care service offers the chance to create jobs and improve pay for social care workers. The Scottish Labour amendment reflects our support for £15 per hour for social care workers. This workforce is made up primarily of women. It's not unskilled, and the workforce deserves to be properly recognised for its labour. Fair Work has far from met its potential. Fair Work in Social Care has been a positive coalition, well navigated by Andy Kerr, but ambitions have been too low. And until we, the politicians, take action, it's all just talk. Fair work has to be a floor, not a ceiling. On a positive note, there are recommendations that we welcome, and if the government motion is turned into action, this could be a huge step forward for the workforce, for women in Scotland. We know that 83% of carers are women, so seeing a dramatic wage rise for these workers will not only end the recruitment and retention crisis, but the economic multipliers in wider society will be huge. And unpaid carers should also get equal payment and formal recognition for their labour. So a properly funded care sector, which creates decent, well-paid jobs, will help us meet our ambitions about the caring economy. Deputy Presiding Officer, as it stands, too much money has leaked out of care to offshore tax havens. Care should always be about people, not about profits. The report criticises the market-based system, but then largely recommends leaving the market-based system in place with a bit more regulation. That's not Scottish Labour's vision for a national care service. The amendment in my name today is clear that a national care service has to be about delivering parity, national standards which are delivered locally, and we cannot have a system of centralisation which doesn't work for care users or staff. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, this report only holds At the moment, this report only holds promise and it requires further action. Nonetheless, it is a positive start and it is evidence about what this Parliament can achieve when there is the will to do so. I look forward to taking this forward in not just the years to come, but there's immediate action that must be taken now, including through the budget, getting that pay rise to workers. But if we can work together to get bold, radical change, we can have a national care service that is not just a title, not just words on a page, that bring that to life, that delivers better outcomes for service users and for the workforce.
Thank you very much, Ms Lennon. Now calling Alec Cole-Hamilton to speak to move Amendment 24134.2. Mr Cole-Hamilton, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. It gives me great pleasure to rise for the Liberal Democrats, and I move the amendment in my name. Can I start by welcoming the publication of the Independent Review of Adult Social Care, which has examined the future delivery of care for older people and disabled people in this country. The review's recommendations rightly focus on a better service for care users and fairer paying conditions for care workers, all of whom we have come to rely on so very much, or understand how much we rely on them in the course of this pandemic. The review also sought to address the concerns of disabled people that previous legislation, such as the Carers Act, the Public Bodies Joint Working Act, or the introduction of self-directed support, have not worked sufficiently well or lived up to the aspirations set for them. And they're not created this system based on human rights, which allows each individual to achieve their goals. These are all laudable aims, Presiding Officer, and Liberal Democrats will always support efforts to stretch ever higher in the quality of support that we offer in things like the establishment of national entitlements, of paying our social care workforce so as to make it a profession of choice, recognise the tremendous contribution they make to the fabric of our society. The fact is that we have tried and failed to reform social care through policy before, so this root and branch review was both timely and necessary. However, the suggested move to a national governance structure causes us significant concern. To our minds, the delivery of health and social care is not suited to central control. It is why we rightly have 14 territorial health boards, even more integrated joint boards. Subsidiarity must apply here because Scotland is too diverse for a one-size-fits-all approach to the delivery of care governed from the centre. We need only look at the problems that came with the amalgamation of Police Scotland and Scotland's regional police forces to see the difficulties that can arise from a central belt knows best approach. As Liberals, we believe that there should be a step change in social care so that it is provided on that human rights basis, built around the individual and the realities of their geography. Care should be considered a normal part of human life that merits investment to allow people to achieve their goals and to secure their own well-being. As with all aspects of intervention, in health and social care, we should embrace prevention first and foremost to offset the need for that care. But when it is needed, as it more often than not will be, then people should have the security of nationally prescribed entitlements and an expectation of a gold standard of provision. We need to step change in how we do this, and that change is key to improving quality of life for social care users. As such, implementation should begin now through existing systems and should not be delayed by the need to create a cumbersome overarching organisation to deliver it. Above all, the social care workforce should be respected for the work they do. Perhaps for the first time, as a result of this pandemic, they have received some of the recognition they finally deserve. They should be afforded a nationally agreed and mandatory fair work package that will make them a profession of choice and allow us to retain those vital, high-quality individuals to that profession. But, Presiding Officer, the answer to all of this is never centralisation. Centralisation has not delivered the benefits promised for other public services, and the loss of local democratic accountability is a risk both to care users and staff, not a benefit. As Liberal Democrats, we will work with other parties in this chamber and the architects of this report to reform social care in our communities, embracing much of what they ask of us. That changes in the experience of care users and care workers, as described by the independent review, built around a new national consensus that social care should be provided around human rights first and foremost. The setting of national care service standards and entitlements with the funding put in place to meet those standards and effective complaint resolution procedures for those people for whom services do not come up to scratch should be at the very heart of that. And we need local commissioning to involve disabled people and other care users in service design and to be informed by local experience of unmet needs as highlighted by the independent review. Changes to value the social care workforce better should include a requirement that any care service, be it delivered by public, private or charitable provider, comply with the Fair Work requirements which are set nationally, and all staff should have nationally agreed pay, terms of employment and career progression. I certainly will.
Monica Lennon.
I'm grateful to Alex Cole-Hamilton. Does he agree with us that the fight for 15 is a fair ask, and to support £15 for social care workers?
Alec Cole-Hamilton.
I think that Monica Lennon made a very compelling argument for that, and I certainly don't see a reason why we wouldn't support that, particularly as she rightly says that 83% of the workforce are indeed female. So this is a gender pay inequality as well. Presiding Officer, as well as involving service users, we must harness the creativity and the passion of our dedicated care workers, and that means affording them effective collective bargaining and the chance for them to help shape the service they provide. That must be built around a central principle of allowing care services to operate in a way that allows carers to build relationships and trust with those care users, moving away from narrow task-based contracts where individual carers change with alarming and unsettling regularity. And part of that offer must begin with the scrapping of charges for care services delivered at home. By so doing, we can enable more people to stay in their homes if they choose, experiencing the better outcomes that can mean. Presiding Officer, it is important to recognise that reform of social care should not just cover the profession itself, how we recognise the tireless contribution of unpaid carers as well, with better support and respite for them and the ability for them to continue to work with the measure of our efforts to bring reform. I will draw my remarks to a close there, but I have more points to make in my summation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Cole-Hamilton. Thank you for keeping to your time. I now call on John Finney. Mr Finney, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. And the Scottish Green Party would like to thank everyone for their involvement in this review process and what the Cabinet Secretary referred to as the roadmap. The Scottish Green Party do support a national care service. And the 53 recommendations set out how it can be improved. I don't think that should be taken as to suggest that the delivery of care isn't of the very highest standards by and large, but overall improvement is needed. And I think it's important that we look forward rather than backward. Families feel a range of emotions about care. They welcome the support. They worry about changes in care, continuity of care. They worry about transitions. They worry about their loved ones being institutionalised if care isn't available at home. And that's ideally where we want to see care delivered. Now, there's a role for self-directed support, but it's slight caution about that. In the wrong hands, it can be seen as a way of those who are responsible not meeting their obligations. The report talks about a more collaborative approach to adult social care, and that's something I identify if I reflect in my days in Highland Council and Highland Council NHS Highland were the first to come together and had what remains a unique model. The assessment of the effectiveness of the delivery of care at home, strangely enough, found that the teams that were co-located had the best results, and that will really surprise no one. So I think the more collaboration we can get, the better. Now, mention's been made of the integrated joint boards, and they're not universally welcome, and I think the relative status they have compared to some local authorities is an issue. There's also talk of step change in capability to address the implementation gap. Now, that capability should not be at the behest of the profit motive. Private companies cherry-picking high-density areas, leaving remote, less densely populated areas like I represent, and then to the local authority who have the statutory obligation, and then extolling how much cheaper they can do things. Now, there's many fine examples of good work being done by commercial care deliverers, but the statutory obligation of that limited company is to deliver profits for its owners. And I certainly am of the view, and my party is of the view, that care and profit need to be separated. And ironically, I recall mentioning that in my first speech in the Parliament 2 sessions ago. Now, there's also talk about the voice of the lived experience needs to be amplified around proposed design, and I get that, absolutely get that. There is, of course, a suggestion of some consultation fatigue, and it's important to say that, yes, of course, we seek input from individuals, but their experience isn't the whole story. We all experience things differently, and if we take a patient-centred approach, then that's the way ahead. Now, local authorities are concerned about accountability. I had representations from one myself last night, and as I've said, and I've been a bit critical of the relationship in some of the joint boards, I find that a bit ironic. Particularly when, in my experience, they've sometimes sought to sidestep their own accountability and blame central governments. But that said, it's very important we listen to COSLA. I'm delighted that the Cabinet Secretary has indicated that there is engagement there. I don't think we're clear on the shape. It's entirely new and innovative. I certainly want it to be innovative, but I don't think we want to discard some of the good practice that's been set out. And setting out a clear vision is another term that's in there. Vision is good, passion is good, empathy is much better, and I'm not sure that ever featured as a qualification in any procurement process. So the new system must be consistent. The statutory responsibilities that are placed must be very, very, very clear as a result of this. Private companies, I don't think have a role in this at all. But it's important we discuss recommendations in a positive and constructive manner. We must recognise that posturing sometimes puts people off, and we want there to be public support for what goes ahead. But that has, of course, to be evidenced by the information we have at hand. I also like the suggestion of on an equal footing with the NHS, and I hope that through time that we would see the warmth and affection for a national care service that we've seen delivered by the NHS. The human rights approach is very, very important. The Highland Senior Citizens Network, they were involved in the Scotland's National Action Plan about a human rights approach. And I remember speaking to someone who was very cynical that thought human rights related to prisoners. But then with the many issues there were at that time around issues of hydration for people in care homes, I think making human rights relevant to people is important, and they certainly can't be more relevant to people who are requiring this sort of assistance. National improvement programmes good. Shifting from markets and competition to collaboration in commissioning and procurement practices. I don't think there's a role for the profit motive in this. This is about delivering fair work, and in the very short time I've left, Presiding Officer, I want to turn to the rural dimension. There must be subsidiarity in all respects of this. We want to see a care system that delivers across Scotland. We won't be supporting the Conservative amendment, we won't be supporting the Liberal amendment, we will be supporting the Labour amendment, but I would say their aspiration about improved conditions is one that we share. There are many other issues that we care about too, which we'll address in the budget. The care after COVID doesn't quote the £15 figure that's mentioned there. Secular bargaining arrangement would be far more important than any figure here. And it's important that Labour, like everyone else, explains where the money is coming from and meaningfully engage in the budget. But it's important that we all get behind this national care service. Thank you, President Officer.
Thank you very much, Mr Finney. I now call Lewis MacDonald to speak on behalf of the Health and Sport Committee. Convener, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I'm glad of the opportunity to speak in this debate to highlight the Health and Sport Committee's own inquiry into the future of social care, a two-year inquiry interrupted but not derailed by the COVID pandemic. I know all members of the committee would want me to express our collective thanks to all paid and unpaid carers, particularly for all they have delivered under the most difficult of circumstances in the last 12 months. I would like to thank in particular those carers and people receiving care who shared their views and experience with our inquiry. Our report is driven by their views and our inquiry has been guided by their experiences. Crucially, they told us that the voices of carers and care users were not being heard or even listened for. Users and carers were equally clear with us that they did not feel that they were being listened to or valued. Yet throughout our inquiry, we learned that care-experienced individuals and frontline staff had invaluable insights from which decision-makers could learn a great deal. We believe there must be a national conversation about the future of social care and sport in Scotland, with those giving and receiving care, their voices at the heart of that conversation. Everyone involved in developing and delivering social care in Scotland must do so with and alongside those who are most impacted. Users and carers' views should be driving the reform process. That may seem a self-evident thing to say, but we are clear that it has not been happening. We therefore welcome the report of the Independent Review on Adult Social Care and its call to put a human rights-based approach at the centre of the system. We are pleased the review puts people at the centre of policy development and decision-making, and many of its recommendations seek to achieve the same aims as we have done, with a focus on involving people who use services, their families and their carers. We heard throughout our inquiry that the current model of care is crisis-driven, reactive and ultimately unsustainable. The provision of care is only considered after a crisis has struck, generally after a person has been admitted to hospital. A fundamentally different approach to social care is required, a proactive approach with prevention at its core. We must move away from the current crisis-driven system, and a key aim should be to support people to live longer, healthier lives in their own homes. Throughout the last 5 years, the committee has been alert to the benefits of shifting the balance of care from the acute sector to the community. Our budget report of 2019 showed that our preventive approach to providing care was more cost-effective in many cases and at the same time improved the quality of life of users. Looking ahead, better use of technology, increased community and public involvement and improved data collection must be embedded in any changes in the way social care is planned and delivered. Certainly.
Neil Findlay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, as Chair of the Committee, what evidence they took from stakeholders on the issue of integration and its success or otherwise, because we were told that integration would release huge amounts of money by eradicating delayed discharge, yet we have record delayed discharge. I wonder if you could address that.
Lewis MacDonald.
We certainly took a great deal of evidence on that issue, and we have done not just in this context, but in the context of a number of inquiries over the years. And I think the point that Neil Findlay makes has been reinforced by the evidence we heard, that the opportunities for greater effectiveness and efficiency and for better care through integration have yet to be realised. We need to create a fair and equitable system. To achieve that, local partnerships must be supported to work with communities to deliver creative, innovative solutions and must not be hindered by overcomplicated processes and bureaucracy. There is a strong legislative and policy base underpinning social care, as we have heard, but it is being undermined by poor implementation. Commissioning and procurement came through strongly as areas with overly complex processes, resulting in confusion, in risk aversion, and an over-focus on the system itself, instead of on outcomes, well-being and care planning for individuals. We are therefore pleased that the Independent Review recommends commissioning for the public good and seeks to reframe commissioning and procurement as collaborative, rights-based and participative. Our own recommendations take the same approach. And we're particularly pleased to note the recommendations of the review in relation to unpaid carers, and we too are calling for them to receive increased support and recognition to be valued for the significant contribution they make. Indeed, we believe the status and value of all carers, paid and unpaid, must be addressed. The lack of value placed on social care staff has been amplified by the pandemic, with social care staff witnessing their NHS colleagues being celebrated and praised, rightly, but in a way that social care staff are not. We are therefore pleased to see recommendations in the review relating to this area. We also believe action must be taken to improve public understanding of social care in Scotland. More must be done to educate and inform the public, to encourage people to have their own conversations about care and support, and to think about the type of care they might need in the future. This will help to move away from a crisis-driven system to more flexible and prevention-focused care. The committee's report does not pretend to answer every significant question, but it is driven by the thoughts, the needs and aspirations of the public. As such, we believe it adds significant value to today's debate. Our recommendations are intended to encourage the change and action that are urgently needed for the future of social care and support in Scotland, and I commend them to Parliament.
Thank you very much, Mr MacDonald. Open debate, 4-minute speeches. Emma Harper to be followed by Jeremy Balfour. Ms Harper, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak in this extremely important debate this afternoon, and I thank the organisations who have provided briefings, including SAMH, Marie Curie, Inclusion Scotland, Age Concern and Alliance. This independent review of adult social care is an important step towards the creation of a national care service for Scotland, which can enable us to improve the experiences of everybody who uses social care support, their carers, their families and the workforce, especially in this COVID pandemic world, and especially recognising the lives lost to this virus. The review is comprehensive and has found many aspects of our adult social care system that are worthy of celebration, such as the introduction of self-directed support, the Carers Act and the Scottish Government's commitment in legislation to integrate health and social care. However, it has also found room for improvement, including through ensuring the Scottish Government's commitment to the principles of fair work. They need to be embedded in social care to achieve better terms and conditions and more rewarding roles for our skilled social care workforce. It is important that this extends to unpaid carers, and that unpaid carers have equal rights and recognition for the invaluable work they do. Presiding Officer, the review found that adult social care support in Scotland is one of unrealised potential. There is sometimes a gap between the intent of groundbreaking legislation, such as the introduction of self-directed support, and the lived experience of people who need the support. The report therefore highlights the need to move from old thinking to new thinking about adult social care, and also highlights the need for a more collaborative approach. This could achieve a step change in capability to address the implementation gap, for the voice of lived experience to be amplified in all aspects of proposed redesign. To this end, the report sets out a clear vision for a new system to ensure delivery of consistent, high-quality social care support. Presiding Officer, the report found that human rights, equity and equality must be placed at the very heart of social care and be mainstreamed and embedded. The report found that delivering a rights-based system in practice must be consistent, intentional and evident in the everyday experience of everyone using social care support. John Finney gave good examples of human rights for all, not just for prisoners. And so this includes our unpaid carers and families and people working in the social care support and social work sector. People must be able to access support at the point they feel they need it, including for advice and signposting to local community-based resources and help. And for barriers to this, such as the current eligibility criteria, it needs to be fundamentally reformed and the charging regime to be removed to allow a greater emphasis on prevention and early intervention. People should understand better what their rights are and social care, what their rights are to social care and support. And duty bearers, primarily social workers, should be focused on realising those rights rather than being hampered in the first instance by considerations of eligibility and cost. There are many other recommendations but these highlight the importance of the person-centred, human rights-based approach for people who rely on our social care system. This is highlighted eloquently in the report by one service user who said, "Start listening to disabled people. We are the solution. We are not the problem." Presiding Officer, this is an important approach, and I would urge the Cabinet Secretary to ensure that all are involved and engaged with future changes so that all voices, from service users to those delivering the services, are heard. We need to ensure that the social care system delivers for everyone across Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Harper. I now call Jeremy Balfour, be followed by George Adam. Mr Balfour, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I, along with others, welcome a publication of the independent review of adult social care. There have been calls for an independent review by the third sector social care providers for many years. Back in 2019, when I held a roundtable event to discuss self-directed support, concerns were raised about gender assumptions, training and development, funding, local authority guidance, the complaints process, and many more issues that appear in the review. However, it has been COVID-19 that has really revealed the cracks in adult social care, and the SNP's failure to protect care homes with over 3,000 deaths in the last year has prompted and moved on this review. We know the effect that these decisions have had on many care homes. Residents have been put under pressure. It has put pressure on staff in regard to their mental health and well-being, and we have seen sadly multiple deaths of residents who were also friends and family. The review identifies familiar themes that will resonate with MSPs, I'm sure, across the chamber. The systems of Goodall outlined in the report reflect the experience many constituents and groups have presented to me as a local MSP. The stress and anxiety caused by the need to fight for support and services, the frustration felt by disabled people when we discover there is no personal assistant with an appropriate skill set available in their hometown to help them lead an active, independent life. And if I can return to this issue of self-directed support, too often when people are given the options that are out there, social workers do not tell them that they can employ someone themselves. Not all the options are being given at the moment. Certainly in my personal experience, when I was putting together my care package, there was no mention of that by the social worker when I met with them on several occasions. It was all about the state providing it, about the other people providing it. Now, that may well be appropriate for many people, but if we're truly going to revolutionise our self-care and the care for older people and those with disabilities, they need to be given all options, and funding needs to follow what is best for the individual, not what that social worker thinks is best for them. We have too many people still caught up with bed delays because a package of care has been cancelled, or it's not available, or it's been delayed. For many relatives, the challenges of securing appropriate social care for a loved one are just too difficult and overwhelming, requiring them to take on the role of unpaid carer, and sometimes leading to financial insecurity when they can't hold their employment down with their caring responsibilities. And again, as we've heard from Monica Lennon and others, this often falls on women and mothers and others to provide that care. And that's why we need to look at this as an issue that affects particularly women within our society. The Deputy Presiding Officer, in conclusion, we must not kick these improvements into the long grass. We must start moving on this and not wait for yet more discussions. Whether that is in regard to developing people's personal capacity, whether it is looking at how we direct self-directed support in a more positive way, whether that is giving empowering to people within their communities. This is an issue that all of us should be united on. I'm pleased that we have a lot of cross-party support on it, and I hope that whoever forms the next government will get the support of the whole Parliament to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Balfour. I call George Adam to be followed by Sandra White. Mr Adam, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I initially take a few seconds to congratulate the convener of the Health and Sport Committee and the clerks for the very pragmatic and practical way they managed to ensure that we debated the work, the report and the work that the Health and Sport Committee made, because I think it's been really helpful for us here today as well. But, Presiding Officer, this is a very important debate for all of us in this chamber. And how we progress from here could become one of the landmark points in the ongoing story of the Scottish Parliament. And it goes without saying that anything we say and do regarding social care is on the back of a very difficult year for everyone. A difficult year for those who have lost a loved one, a difficult year for those that work in a sector that's had to deal with very difficult and challenging circumstances. But there is much within our adult social care system that warrants celebration. We also have a key legislation that's been created to support the sector, examples of which are the introduction of the Self-Directed Support, Carers Act and the Scottish Government's Integrated Health and Social Care Agenda, all of which are the way forward, but we have had challenges along the way to meet the expectation. But nothing worthwhile is easy, because it's all, if it was, we'd all been doing it previously in the past. In September 2020, the Scottish Government announced its programme for government review into social care, the report of which is what we're discussing today. And if there's anything we have learned over the past year, is the need for change within our social care settings, and that there are better ways of working. This is something I've continually pursued with health boards as they have come to committee. Recently, health boards have said that they have found a way to work better with other services over the past year, because they've had to do it, and it was important for them to do so. Those who manage our health boards are correct, as during this very difficult year, they have found ways to make what appeared impossible last year happen this year. It tends to be around how they interact with IGBs, because apparently they were working the way they should now. Everyone in Scotland's NHS and care sector are to be congratulated for the work they've done. But every time the board members come to committee and explain what they've achieved this year, I can't help asking, why did it take a worldwide pandemic before we made this all work? I know that crisis can focus people on delivery, but I still find it bizarre that many health boards took so long to understand this. The independent review of adult social care couldn't have been published at a more important time, and it is a substantial piece of work. And its many recommendations shows us a different way forward for how we provide care. The creation of a national care service has been spoken about by many colleagues here today, and how we take this forward, in my opinion, is probably the most important part of this report. What we create from here is the real challenge, and ensure that it remains robust, deliverable, and create the type of national care service we all want. The establishment of human rights and approach to social care and incorporates equality should be without having to say anything further. But better support for the representation of unpaid carers. I'm sure I'm not the only MSP who has had unpaid carers approach them, and we've had to guide them through the process of trying to get the support they need. Now, with this report we have here, we have the roadmap to be able to say that we could find a way to make that better, and it's extremely important. But most importantly, Presiding Officer, we're talking about delivering fair work for the workforce and increased and more effective investment. For far too long, men and women who work in the care sector have been subjected to conditions different from those afforded in our National Health Service, both financially and work-related conditions, and anything that can balance this anomaly is to be welcomed. This will obviously be helped by the proposed shifting from markets and competition to collaboration and commissioning and procurement practices. The report also highlights the need for the move from old thinking to new thinking. Now, Presiding Officer, this to me seems like something that would have been obvious for us all. But as we go forward, today is day one, Presiding Officer. And as this debate goes forward, we need to all work together to ensure that we can create the type of service that we all want, to ensure that we don't have this debate in future years.
Thank you very much. I call Sandra White, to be followed by Richard Leonard. Ms White, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I very much welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate, as others have said also. I wanted to begin by being positive, because I think it is a very positive review, and who better to quote from than the chair of the review, Derek Feely, who said, and I quote, "There is much about adult social care support in Scotland that is groundbreaking and worthy of celebration. As had already been mentioned, the introduction of self-directed support, integration of health and social care, and the promise of the Carers Act form the scaffolding on which to build. And really, Presiding Officer, that is exactly what we need to do. Build on the foundation blocks the Scottish Government has so far put in place. And I do thank and welcome the announcements made by the Cabinet Secretary this morning, or not this morning, just earlier on, in regards to improvements and monies that's put forward in regard to carers as well. And I really fully support the recommendations put forward. And I want to thank everyone who's been involved in shaping and feeding into this review. I really am pleased that this review had extensive engagement with service users. As their lived experience, I think we all know, that is crucial to informing any future changes to the system. As a member of the Health and Sports Committee, this is a subject we have also been looking at, and we hope that our work in this area will also feed into this review and help shape the future of adult social care across the country. We engage with service users in the committee and those that deliver social care services, and I was struck by their personal experiences. There's so much those of us who don't need to access social care services that we take for granted. Service users have spoken of systematic barriers in accessing services, their choices and control over their lives and their needs not taken into consideration or even taken away completely. For almost a year, we have been firmly focused on this pandemic, and our actions collectively were to protect lives, quite rightly, and our NHS. But it has been a year like no other, with our frontline workers facing incredible challenges, and those dependent on the social care sector, and those working there, either paid or unpaid, also feeling the enormous impact of the pandemic. Evidence that we received in the committee from one service user really should resonate with all of us. They were reflecting on how the pandemic took away much of their control and the choice of how they lived their lives. And they said, and I quote also, "This gives people a small insight what it is like for people with support needs and their carers, because that really is our everyday lives, controlled by rules and regulations about what we can and cannot do." Another service user says, "I don't think the general public realise if you're dependent on this kind of support, how precarious it can be. I don't think they realise we're talking about the most fundamental needs and rights. And to have that taken away from you by somebody who very often doesn't know you or hasn't really taken the time to understand your situation is such a violation." And these are only a couple of examples we in the Health Committee heard from, but they certainly are not lone voices in their experiences. Now, we really must recognise and learn from the effects of the pandemic, but we also need to look beyond it. I think George Adam mentioned that as well, and how we can take those foundations and create a sector that, as one service user said, is not a safety net, but a springboard for those that need support, a system that enables people to reach their potential, provides independence, a rights-based people power approach. A national care service shaped and informed by service users has enormous potential, and I very much hope that this will be delivered by the next session of MSPs. There is much work to be done, but the review sets out really clearly what we need to put in place, where support is needed and how that support should be delivered, ensuring equality and equity. And in conclusion, Presiding Officer, Alex Cole-Hamilton mentioned people should expect a gold standard. Indeed, they should. And in particular, I believe, from the elected members, and I would ask Alex Cole-Hamilton to reflect on this. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, Ms White. And I now call Richard Leonard to be followed by Ruth Maguire. Mr Leonard, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And let me begin with where we find common ground. If we want a different set of results, we need a different system. That's what Derek Feely writes in his foreword, and I agree. It should be built on the values of human rights, equity and equality. We do need co-production by service users in the design and the delivery of social care. We must demand, at last, a decisive shift in public policy and so public spending towards prevention, which was recommended a decade ago by Campbell Christie. When instead of that, over the last 10 years, we have witnessed cuts to social care services in Scotland of up to 20%, as this SNP central government has decimated the budgets of local government year after year. As the report says, public spending on social care does represent an investment in the Scottish economy. The principle of social care, free at the point of need, should be adopted right across Scotland. And the outstanding question of the undervaluation of the predominantly female workforce must be addressed with renewed urgency and unwavering ambition. But let me turn to the main conclusion of the report, which is that we need to create a national care service. I agree. The government motion today speaks of a national care service in law on an equal footing with NHS Scotland. And I agree with that as well. But that is not what the review is recommending. In fact, the report goes out of its way. It devotes a whole section to an attack on the case for public ownership. Just look at the home farm care home in Skye, it says. But the home farm care home does not make the case for continued private ownership of social care. It makes the case against it. And we also know, because it's in the report, that 84% of the current annual funding of social care in Scotland comes directly from the public purse, through the public sector. But instead of a national care service publicly funded and so publicly owned, so on an equal footing with the NHS, the Feely Review is recommending that local councils and the tens of thousands of social care workers who they employ are reduced to competing as just another provider in a procurement exercise run by an unelected integration joint board. Is that, I ask the Cabinet Secretary, an equal footing? Now, I accept that the review calls for a new deal with private providers, but it is deafening in its silence on the ethics of the biggest providers of residential care in Scotland being run by private companies whose ultimate ownership is in offshore tax havens. And it is silent on how public ownership keeps all funding in the local economy and all money reinvested in the care service and its workforce. If this Parliament is serious, as I believe we must be, about a national care service being established with the same values as the National Health Service on an equal footing, then it must be created on the basis of public service, not private markets, collaborative or otherwise, on human dignity, not corporate profit, on public interest, not the money interest. And the means through which it's delivered should be local, must be democratically accountable, must be increasingly publicly, not privately owned and run. This matters. This matters because it is about the kind of society that we want to live in. It's about the relations of power within it. The Cabinet Secretary knows that, which is why she must also know that the time is now for bold courage and conviction, that the change that we need to make is not simply for this generation, but for future generations. That demands vision in government, resolve in this Parliament, and above all else, it demands the active consent of the people. That's what we need if we are truly to create a national care service worthy of the name.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. Thank you. I call Ruth Maguire to be followed by Fulton McGregor. Ruth Maguire.
Presiding Officer, the independent review is an important step towards the creation of a national care service for Scotland. And in creating this service, there must be a laser-like focus on improving the experiences of everybody who uses social care support, their carers, their families and the workforce. There's no doubt that the pandemic, this last difficult year, has both brought sharply into focus existing inequalities and laid bare the fragility in our systems. Policy intention in terms of equality and human rights has not always matched the experience of far too many of our citizens, a point that Age Scotland highlights in their briefing when they say that the review identifies the significant gaps between what should be happening in social care and what happens in reality. I agree with them that ensuring these are addressed as a priority would be a major step forward. Improving adult social care gives us a tremendous opportunity to improve people's lives, to build our economy and to invest in high quality, fair work. The report's recommendations for establishing a human rights and equality approach to social care services and support are rooted in the work to consider incorporation of international treaties into domestic legislation and the recent experiences during the pandemic that exposed structural inequalities and pre-existing inadequacies in the current social care support system. I of course agree that placing human rights, equity and equality at the very heart of social care and mainstreaming and embedding this approach is essential. However, even as I just use those words, I'm acutely aware that it's phrasing that I hear a lot. And if I might be blunt, those words mean nothing unless that's what's delivered in practice. A rights-based system in practice only has value when it's consistent, intentional, and most importantly, evident in the everyday experience of people using social care support. Evident in the experience of unpaid carers, evident in the experience of families, and evident to people working in the social support and social work sector. The report recommends that people must be able to access support at the point they feel they need it, including for advice and signposting to local community-based resources and help, and for barriers to this, such as the current eligibility criteria and charging regime, be fundamentally reformed and removed to allow a greater emphasis on prevention and early intervention. And that people should understand better what their rights are to social care and supports. It highlights the role of duty bearers, primarily social workers. And again, we have to seriously look at what barriers are in their way when it comes to realising the rights of their clients. Social work as a profession take a rights-based, person-centred approach. If considerations of eligibility and cost are hampering workers in that practice, then we must address that. Good provision of care is an investment in our whole country and the mark of a good society. Social care exists to help people equally enjoy their human rights, the rights to live with dignity, independent living, meaningful and active participation in Scottish society, work and education. There have been some fine speeches this afternoon showing that this is understood across the chamber. Social care must have parity with our NHS, be free at the point of delivery, with human rights and fair work truly at its heart. Let's make sure that collectively we take on the challenges and opportunities presented in this report and deliver just that for the people of Scotland. Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, Ms Maguire. And could I call Fulton McGregor before we move to closing speeches? Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This independent review is an important step towards the creation of a national care service for Scotland. This will ultimately enable us to improve the experiences of everybody who uses social care support, their carers, their families and the workforce. COVID-19 has changed the way we think about many aspects of our lives and has had us thinking about the sort of country that we want to live in. And I'm very pleased that the government has taken this forward, and in time it really could be a positive legacy to come out of this most difficult and tragic period of our history. Presiding Officer, I'm also pleased that the review has found many aspects of our adult social care system that should be commended. And a point raised by George Adam, and it includes the introduction of self-directed support, something that has been particularly useful to many of my constituents. In addition, the Carers Act and the Scottish Government's commitment and legislation to integrate health and social care should also be celebrated. However, it is recognised that there is room for improvement, and the 53 recommendations that have been made will see even more support provided once they are implemented. The recommendations are robust and will allow us to move to a new way of thinking, where collaboration is the key to ensuring that those with lived experience are listened to when we are designing and implementing a social care system that delivers for everyone. By establishing a human rights approach to social care that incorporates equality and gives better support to unpaid carers, we will start to address the gaps that have been identified. We must also deliver fair work for the social care workforce through increased and more effective investment. And having our social care staff shown just how much more they deserve recognition and higher pay, working throughout this pandemic, putting themselves and their families often at risk, often in low pay and with little recognition. Every one of them deserves our thanks, praise and our commitment to better their working conditions. I spoke to a care home worker in my constituency recently who had been off work for a period after testing positive for COVID-19. Unfortunately, and to her surprise, she was not eligible for the self-isolation grant, meaning she lost out on pay, and this made her feel really undervalued. I know the self-isolation grant criteria has now been updated and there is an integration and overlap between the various and different parts of the system, but even small things like this can make a big difference to people like that care worker I spoke to. And Presiding Officer, I also want to speak briefly, as others have, about the important role that unpaid carers play. Supporting unpaid carers has been a priority for this SNP government, both before and during the pandemic, which is why we established rights for all carers to support and advice under the Carers Act. The Scottish Government continues to support local implementation of those rights, backed by additional investment, which now stands at £39.5 million per year. And this is particularly important now when many carers are under additional pressure. The actual number of unpaid carers in Scotland could be as high as 800,000 people, and we all know someone who's a carer. We may even be ourselves one, either now or at another time in the future. And I'd like to take this opportunity, Presiding Officer, to mention my gran. Before this debate, I was actually thinking about her this morning. She always loved Pancake Tuesday. I'm not sure why, but she really went out her way each year. And I was telling my own kids about these memories this morning. And in context of this debate, looking back to the late 90s and early 2000s, and I've said in here before that I would have probably been classified as a young carer myself, along with the rest of my family, as we helped to care for her in her latter years. But that's just what we chose to do. We didn't think of ourselves as carers. And that, I think, is the point. There are likely many, many people in this position today. And that's why it's so important that support is made available through the government. Presiding Officer, the heart of this review and our decisions is the opportunity to improve the lives of adults who both receive and give care. There are, of course, added financial benefits to the economy, and this allows us to invest in high-quality, fair work. First and foremost, we must ensure that the people of Scotland can equally enjoy their human rights, including rights to live with dignity, independent living, meaningful and active participation in Scottish society, and opportunities for work and education. And I want to conclude by talking about, like others have, about care homes, because all MSPs of all parties and all positions of government, every one of us, will have been struck by the almost impossible dilemma and heartbreaking situation facing residents over the last year.
Mr Fulton, you're already slightly, Mr McGregor, sorry, you're slightly over time already. If you can bring your remarks to a conclusion, thank you.
Okay. On the one hand, a horrible virus that disproportionately affects our older generations and those in care homes, and on the other, the most extreme restrictions necessary to prevent the virus impacts on isolation, loneliness, and the dignity of residents. What an impossible choice. And it's so important that the creation of any national care service delivers for care homes and honours the legacy of those residents who sacrificed so much in so many ways during this year. Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I support the government motion.
Thank you very much, Mr McGregor. And we move to closing speeches. Alex Cole-Hamilton to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. This has been an excellent debate, and some real passion has been shared in some of the remarks, and I will touch on some of that passion as I summate our amendment. This Parliament has attempted reform of the social care ecosystem several times before, and we've heard something of that in the integration of health and social care agenda. I think that a great idea, but poorly executed, not given the resources or accountability that it required. In self-directed support, mentioned both eloquently both by Emma Harper and lastly by Fulton McGregor. I worked in the social care sector when self-directed support was first introduced, and an example of how the idea was great but the execution was poor could be seen in the local authority that I helped try and anticipate how it was going to build in self-directed support for its community. It had a respite care unit for which served 107 children who required respite support. But it did so and it met every single one of their needs. There was no market for another provider to come and produce a rival service from which parents could then choose how to direct their support. So nothing changed for them with this agenda. I think we need to recognise the importance of putting individuals at the heart of this, but understand the market conditions around which this is built. Donald Cameron, I think, shares my party's concern regarding centralisation. opposition, and he rightly pointed us to the briefing provided by CCPS, who pointed to the need for any sort of national care provision to have local variation, flexibility and accountability built right into its core. I don't believe that we can do that with a sort of monolith at the centre controlling things. Monica Lennon pressed me on the £15 an hour and referred to this as a floor, not a ceiling. I have a lot of sympathy for that. And as I said in my reply to her, that 83% of women are affected by this. However, I think John Finney captured our position, our party's position in this, and said that sectoral bargaining is actually more important than a baseline figure. I have a lot of sympathy with the baseline being that £15 an hour, but I think we would go for... I won't take an intervention at this time, thank you, Ms Lennon. I'm sorry I don't have time. It's still a very compelling point. He also made an important point about rebalancing the priorities in our private sector providers away from profit and towards continuity of care and the importance of giving dignity in old age. And he recognised the difficulties of rurality that I referred to in my opening speech around 25-minute journeys for a 15-minute visit, which is again stripping relationships out of care. Lewis MacDonald pointed to the social care inquiry. It should remind us that deliberation in this place on reform of social care is almost perennial. And Jeremy Balfour, I thought, in an excellent speech, talked about the cracks of adult social care, which span the problems in care homes, publicly funded care homes in my community, which are now rectified to the COVID disaster we have seen in our care homes. George Adam talked about and I think it was a direct quote when I say the national care service we all want. Well, I think if this debate does anything, presiding officer, it was helpfully shown that there are at least 4 different views as to what a national care service might look like. And I think we see that in the measure of the amendments that we debate tonight. Richard Leonard, I have to say, made a barnstorming speech, and I recognise his qualities as a speaker and his loss as a speaker as leader of the Labour Party. But whilst I agreed with a lot of what he said, I don't think he recognised that whilst private homes certainly fail, so do the public homes. There isn't a guarantee of quality if there's public provision. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I just think it's important to recognise the reality of the situation. He also talked as if the NHS was entirely free from privatisation, where it is not. There is a significant element to private provision within the NHS as well. Ruth McQuire talked about unshackling social work, and that's important too. I'll finish with this, presiding officer. We need to build a cathedral of trust in social care, and that's built around the individual, but it's recognising the shortcomings of the system we have right now, and the importance that is not going to, the importance of our view, that is not going to be resolved from the centre, that actually local accountability, flexibility and autonomy is at the very heart of that vision that we would all seek to aspire to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicole Neil Findlay to be followed by Brian Whittle.
Presiding officer, can declare an interest as a member of United Union, and my mum is a resident in a care home. And I've probably spoken about social care more than any other issue in my time in 10 years in Parliament. You could fill this chamber with the reports that have been written on social care over those years. The system we know is broken. It was broken before COVID, but the crisis has exposed it like never before. Everyone accepts there must be change, and that the good work that's going on in social care is despite the system, not because of the system. And nowhere is that more evidence than in the workforce. And currently the sector, as we've heard across the piece, is riven with low pay, poor conditions, and in some cases outright profiteering. Look at HC1. It has over 300 care homes in the UK, more than 50 in Scotland. In 2019, that company, registered in the Cayman Islands, let's not forget, paid £48 million in dividends in 1 year to its shareholders, paid 0 corporation tax, none, and has posted a loss every single year it's been in operation. And today, it advertises care assistant jobs. I checked this morning at £9.30 an hour, a laundry assistant at £8.72. HC1, who own the Skye Care Home, who currently own the Red Mill Care Home, and many others that have been at the centre of scandalous neglect at times and multiple deaths during the pandemic. And the Feely report says nothing on getting rid of HC1 from the sector. And it mentions some good stuff on fair work. Absolutely. I don't know how many times I've tried to amend legislation in here to give social care staff fair work in decent conditions. I've done it several times, attempted it with amendments. All of them rejected by ministers, all of them voted down by George Adam and Sandra White and all the other backbenchers who spoke in the debate. Now they're falling over themselves to give care workers good terms and conditions. What happened when we could have done it in the past? It's 2 years since the Fair Work Convention report into social care recommended establishing collective bargaining. 2 years, so why has it not happened? Why has it not happened by now? We're going to vaccinate the entire population, hopefully in 6 months, but we can't set up collective bargaining in 2 years. Why? So on workforce issues, we're taking a big step in the right direction. The recommendations are welcome and need implemented now. But one of the great frustrations of the report is the lack of genuine analysis of the last 14 years of cuts after cuts after cuts to social care. The lack of analysis of whether integration has been a success or failure. The report also fails to look at delayed discharge prior to COVID and the magical eradication of it in April and May. And where is the condemnation of policy decisions that contributed to the current human rights catastrophe going on in our care homes? The PPE issue, the failure to test, the DNR issue, the denial of hospital treatment, silence on these fundamental issues which are at the heart of the human rights agenda. So while Feely is good in parts, what it certainly does not recommend is the creation of a national care service on par with the NHS. Because like so many government initiatives, the rhetoric isn't met with reality. We know we've had 14 years of cuts. We know we've got an over-reliance in the private sector. We know in many care homes standards are not good enough. We have a pain conditions and recruitment crisis. And yet the report says that the problem lies with councils, the very councils who've been stripped of the cash to deliver the service in the first place, and the answer is to remove their local role, centralise decision-making and pass it back to ministers and senior civil servants who know best. I don't think so. I reject that approach. But the greatest central weakness of the report is the refusal to do anything at all about removing the profit motive from the care system. Feely proposes reforms of commissioning, identifies delayed discharge as once again the magic elixir that will release millions of pounds into the system, driving up care. The reality is, we all know what the magic elixir is. It's pounds, shillings and pence. Because that's what eradicated delayed discharge in April and May last year, when all those elderly people got fired out of hospital, untested into care homes almost overnight, because money was made available that wasn't there before. Cabinet Secretary, I reject Mr Feely's faith in what he calls an actively managed market. I believe it is complete hokum. When the Minister was a socialist, she probably believed that too. The report rejects nationalising the sector, meaning the likes of HC1 will continue to extract their 10% profit every year. Why are we not looking at buying back care homes and in the long run saving money for the system to put back into care? Presiding Officer, we have to now be at the start of a campaign for a genuine national care service. That's the goal that we have, with decent care for our older people, dignity for everyone who needs social care. That's what I'll be campaigning on.
Brian Whittle, followed by Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased to be closing this hugely important debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. And like others in this debate, I would like to place on record my party's thanks to Derek Feely, to the panel and all those involved in what is a very comprehensive report. And in general, it has been quite a consensual debate, because I think we all are trying to work for the very same outcome. As my colleague Donald Cameron reminded us in his contribution, this report is delivered against a backdrop of a COVID-19 pandemic, which to date has claimed 3,146 care home residents' lives. Over a third of COVID deaths in Scotland. Furthermore, it cannot be overlooked that patients were sent to care homes early in the pandemic, despite being COVID-19 positive, and that over 3,000 patients were discharged into care homes without being tested between the 1st of March and the 30th of May in 2020. This is why our amendment repeats our call for a public inquiry into this scandal, which, Presiding Officer, has already been agreed by the Parliament votes twice. There are relatives and friends who will need answers. As for the report, I do think the way in which the issues pertaining to the adult social care have been framed captures much of the challenges that social care faces. And I want to mention here my colleague, committee colleague George Adam, and his contribution and his continued questioning of IGBs and health boards when he is asked why it took a global pandemic to make the change, why it took a global pandemic to start the different IGBs and NHSs collaborating with each other. And he has a point, but change we have, and we need to make sure that we maintain that rate of change. Donald Cameron also highlighted that the RCN stated that the current way the adult social care operates is not fit for purpose and needs a radical overhaul, and that change is needed. There is much in the aims and objectives of the report that we would agree with. Removing needless bureaucratic processes in addressing our social care. We can't have families describing it, as they did in the report, as notoriously difficult and overcomplicated. Applying national standards to drive up quality care across Scotland is obviously a good aim, as is delivering better working conditions nationally, including improving training and career opportunities for carers. It speaks to recruitment and retention of staff, as well as delivering a healthy workplace environment for all staff. As the convener, Lewis MacDonald, has said, the Health and Sport Committee considered the report and responses required as well. And part of our report said that health and social care partnerships will be required to deliver a prevention-focused strategy. To prevent crisis situations, there has to be a focus on a neighbourhood approach to the planning of health and social care services. And that better collaboration and relationship building across sectors and policy is required. Locality planning must be required and measured against the success in shifting this, achieving this shift. But one of the committee's key recommendations was the need to develop a strategy for a widespread use of technology to improve delivery of social care support. And I have long called for a significant investment in the communication and collaboration technology that can follow the patient as they transition between social care, primary care and secondary care. Future policy must be driven by collection and analysis of quality data. This allows us for the setting of measurements of success, for monitoring against those measurements and evaluating outcomes. Indeed, Audit Scotland's briefing Planning for Outcomes asked that public bodies should be supported on measured outcomes. However, the committee found it difficult to follow the money, and that needs to change. I think the role of the third sector was investigated by the Health and Sport Committee as well, and we recommended that the advocacy role of the third sector must be strengthened, because one of the key takes for me from the report is the wider view of what adult social care actually should include, and the integration of statutory services and third sector has to improve. And I think I said earlier in my contribution, the report frames adult social care issues very well. However, it will be in the delivery of solutions that we will determine levels of success. In that regard, we are yet to hear how the Scottish Government will implement any of the recommendations. The Scottish Government must avoid continuing centralisation of statutory services, which are much better delivered as close to the point of need as possible. That will require fair funding for councils, as called for from these benches. I think the outcomes must be controlled around the needs of the individual and allow for variation, flexibility and accountability as suggested by the Coalition of Care and Support Providers in Scotland. There is no one-size-fits-all. As Sammy suggests, social care providers need to be included in the design of the social care services. As Jeremy Balfour said in his speech, COVID-19 has put an incredible pressure on our social care and NHS system, and under that pressure, weaknesses have been exposed. Those healthcare workers and carers delivering within the system have been nothing short of remarkable. And I think I agree with Neil Findlay that there's fantastic work being done despite the system. but that cannot be stated too many times. However, the systems themselves have been problematic. The communication between the NHS, I think especially secondary care and social care, has been highlighted as falling short too often. So the Scottish Government should not try and hide from this. I think we need to accept this and look at how the system can be made more robust and deliver solutions accessible to those in need. This is the start of a national conversation around adult social care, about the future of adult social care in Scotland and how a more prevention-focused approach to adult social care needs to be delivered, as the convener highlighted. So in conclusion, if I could, Presiding Officer, adult social care needs a complete overhaul. COVID has laid bare the need for a national discussion on how it will be funded, organised and delivered, and I look forward to hearing from the Scottish Government how that national care service would look like in their eyes. Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And can I call on Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman to conclude our debate?
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking members for their contribution to the debate this afternoon. I think whilst there are undoubtedly disagreements and we shall be supporting none of the amendments to our motion, there are clear areas of agreement, and I think that bodes exceptionally well for the work of a future Scottish Parliament, the next Scottish Parliament, which will have to get into much more of the detail than we will be able to do in the weeks that remain to us. And I think it is really important to be clear at the outset that the Feely report is itself very clear that there is a great deal to build on in the existing provision of social care by many of those who provide it, in the legislation that exists, that has the right intent and the right legislative underpinning. But what is also clear is that that is not enough and it is not consistent enough. And I think Jeremy Balfour put it particularly well from his own personal experience to describe what it is like to be told what you're going to get as opposed to asked what it is that you need. And we see that across the country, where the consistency of quality delivery is not good enough. That is what we have heard as MSPs, I've heard as a Cabinet Secretary in this role and previously as a Minister. That's what the Feely report heard. And it takes us to a central dilemma, which is how do you ensure national standards that are delivered, national consistency where you don't get one level of social care support in one part of the country, but a different level of social care support in another part of the country. How do you do that, creating a national care service, but that you also manage to retain local knowledge, local expertise and local input? What is really noticeable is that that removal of variation is specifically argued for in the report. And it is MND, Marie Curie, Inclusion Scotland, WCPS, the Alliance, all supporting the creation of a national care service for the standards that it can bring, for the ethical commissioning it can put in place, for the fair work principles that it can embed, and for the removal of variation. So we need to find a way to work our way through what shouldn't be an either-or, black-white, and certainly not, in my mind, needs to be the monolith that Mr Cole-Hamilton fears. How do we create that national care service that still retains that level of local input and, most importantly, has at its heart those who use the service and are part and parcel of making decisions about its delivery? Much of this is for the next Parliament and the next Scottish Government. But as I hope I've set out today, I'm not waiting for that, but moving now to provide the additional resource that I set out today and is in the budget. The active work with Andy Kerr that has a very clear timeline on it, and the Fair Work Group that he leads, to begin to flesh out and put in place early on in the next Scottish Parliament the opportunities for collective bargaining, for improved terms and conditions, for what it actually means to have ethical commissioning, and to use the National Care Home contract now to make some important changes, not least bringing trade unions for the first time ever to the table, and to working with COSLA to see how far we can go to address their concerns and set out significant areas that we do agree on between national and local government. And to put in place, this bit is critically important and very close to my heart, put in place the steps necessary to really put users and their voice at the heart of policy and delivery. We've done it before. We do it elsewhere in government. I have to say, and I have of course a vested interest, we did it very successfully and it continues in social security. There is no reason why we cannot do it again in this most critical areas. The next Scottish Parliament election looms, and it will of course be for all parties to set out their own plans in this area. But I am clear, and this government is clear, that in May we will ask the people of Scotland to back the creation of a national care service that is intentional in its human rights, in its delivery of dignity and fairness, that is person-centred at its heart, and that comes with a significant additional financial investment. Those are political choices that every party has to decide how they want to make them. This government is clear that if it is the future government, it is making those political choices, making that investment, ensuring that variation is removed, and significantly putting those who use the services and who will use the services in the future at the heart of the design and the delivery and the regulation and the control of those services. It is, at the end of the day, an investment that we will make in ourselves, in each other and in our country's future. I move the amendment, Presiding Officer, as I've said, in my name.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. And that concludes our debate on an independent review of adult social care. We're moving straight on to decision time. And the first question this evening, I would remind members that if the amendment in the name, before the first question, if the amendment in the name of Donald Cameron is agreed, then the amendment in the name of Monica Lennon will fall. So the first question is that Amendment 24134.4 in the name of Donald Cameron, which seeks to amend motion 24134 in the name of Jean Freeman on independent review of adult social care be agreed. Are we all agreed? No. We're not agreed. We're going to move to a division and we're going to suspend parliamentary proceedings for a few moments to allow members to access the voting app. Parliament is suspended for a few moments. Thank you, colleagues. We are now back in session. So we're going to move to the vote. Just to remind members, the question is that Amendment 24134.4 in the name of Donald Cameron, which seeks to amend motion 24134 in the name of Jean Freeman on independent review of adult social care be agreed. This is a 1-minute division. Members may cast their votes now. That vote is now closed. Please let me know if you have had any difficulties in voting. Point of order, Fergus Ewing. Thank you. Mr Ewing would have voted no. I'll make sure that is added to the voting register. Thanks, Mr Ewing. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 24134.4 in the name of Donald Cameron is yes 28, no 95. There was one abstention. The amendment is therefore not agreed. The next question is the amendment 24134.3 in the name of Monica Lennon, which seeks to amend the motion in the name of Jean Freeman. Be agreed. Are we all agreed? We're not agreed. We'll move to a vote. This is a 1-minute division on the amendment in the name of Monica Lennon. That vote is now closed. Again, just let me know if you had any difficulties in exercising your vote. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 24134.3 in the name of Monica Lennon is yes 30, no 95. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. So the next question is the amendment 24134.2 in the name of Alex Cole-Hamilton, which seeks to amend the motion in the name of Jean Freeman. Be agreed. Are we all agreed? We're not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Members may cast their votes now. Again, a 1-minute decision. Please let me know if you have any difficulty in voting. That vote is now closed. Please let me know if you are not able to vote. Thank you. The result of that vote on amendment number 24134.2 in the name of Alex Cole-Hamilton is yes 8, no 117. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. And our final question is that motion 24134 in the name of Jean Freeman on independent review of adult social care be agreed. Are we all agreed? No. We're not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Members may cast their votes now. A 1-minute division. That vote is now closed. The result of the vote on motion 24134 in the name of Jean Freeman is yes 68, no 57. There were no abstentions. The motion is therefore agreed. And that concludes decision time. I just remind members to wear their masks, observe social distancing and follow the one-way systems when leaving the chamber. I close this meeting. Thank you.